Last season, they had Paolo missed 36 games, Franz Wagner missed 22 games, Jalen Suggs missed 47 games and the playoffs, Mo Wagner missed 52 games and the playoffs. It was reasonable before they got Bane to expect positive regression in at least some of those areas. And now they're basically replacing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope off his worst offensive season of his career. They're replacing him with Desmond Bane in his prime. This is like wild to me.
Desmond Bane is currently 24th all time in terms of career three-point shooting percentage. That is all time in the history of the game of basketball. He's elite in terms of efficiency. He is elite in terms of his deep three-point shooting. He is elite in terms of his pull-up three-point shooting. And he's excellent at catch and shoot three-point shooting. So this is a guy who is tailor-made for the needs of the Orlando Magic. I don't think this should be a polarizing deal. The Orlando Magic, to me, just seemingly quietly push themselves into legit contender status in the Eastern Conference. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Geoff. Geoff, we had to get on here and talk about what seems to be a pretty polarizing deal that just happened, that just went down. The Orlando Magic making a sneaky, in my opinion, blockbuster deal with the Memphis Grizzlies. And this is the kind of deal, Geoff, that I think we'll be talking about next May as something that was really underrated by a lot of NBA fans. The Orlando Magic traded KCP, Cole Anthony, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and a first-round swap for Desmond Bane. I'll just foreshadow on this pod right away and come out and say that I don't think this should be a polarizing deal. The Orlando Magic, to me, just seemingly quietly push themselves into legit contender status in the Eastern Conference and potentially title contending status for next season. And I think if you can do that with one deal, then you do it. But there's so much specifics to break down around this deal. And this is really the kind of thing that you and I love to discuss. This is tailor-made for a hot hand theory conversation when we're talking about a player like Desmond Bane. Geoff, before we go into the fine details, what are your just overarching thoughts on the deal? How do you feel about it right now?
So I don't know if you know this about me, XJ, but I was a big Madden guy growing up, and like my favorite thing of Madden was always starting the new franchise. Like I would like go through the draft and build the all young players team, and then like the second my team had any success, like I won a Super Bowl, I'd be like, okay, let's start again. And so,
Nice.
like, I've always had an affinity for guys like Kobe, guys like Dirk, guys who stay with one team. Like, I'm also a nostalgic person, so I do like that aspect of the NBA. But from an analysis standpoint and just from an overall viewing standpoint, stuff like this really makes me excited for the next season, getting to watch guys in new places, getting to see how they're deployed. So just from a fan aspect, this is a really, really exciting trade, just to the thought of Bane being unlocked in different ways in Orlando and what he can do for them, what he can do for some of their other young players. Honestly, my first thought about this trade had to do with the Orlando Magic. We talk a lot here about like variance and luck here. Like we talk a lot about it. I mean, our Knicks episodes, when we previewed the Knicks Celtics series, we talked a lot about 3-point variance and how the Knicks were going to want to lean into that because the Celtics were such big favorites going into that series, but their game was predicated on 3-point shooting. I don't think people realize just how unlucky the Magic were last season. And I think they were being slept on already as a team before they got Desmond Bane. So I just want to run through it really quickly for people here who are, maybe don't follow the Magic as closely, but are interested in what this trade could do for them. And here is what I have on the Magic. So 2023, 2024, they win 47 games, and they're the 5 seed. They take the Cavs to 7 games. Paolo has a really, really good playoff series against the Cavs. They go into this next season with an average rotation player age of below 25 years old, 24 and a half years old, and they're coming off a 47-win season. Last season, they had Paolo missed 36 games, Franz Wagner missed 22 games, Jalen Suggs missed 47 games and the playoffs. Mo Wagner missed 52 games and the playoffs. Wendell Carter Jr. went from a 3-year average of 35% from three to shooting 23% from three. When you have Paolo Banchero at power forward, a center who can shoot threes is a really big part of the paradigm. We've seen it with Brook Lopez in Milwaukee. Paolo Banchero, unless he becomes like a sharpshooter with the type of how his game and what it's predicated on, he wants a center who can space the floor. He wants maximum space. He did not have that last season. So go along with Wendell Carter Jr. Jonathan Isaac went from 37% from three in 2024 to 26% from three in 2025. KCP, who they signed to be that spacer for them, had the worst shooting season of his career. Add all of these things up. Look, all of this in one season, I'm not saying it was all fluky bad luck. Surely there are things that went into it. But I do think that with the age and the pedigrees of the players on their roster, it was reasonable before they got Bane to expect positive regression in at least some of those areas. And now they're basically replacing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope off, again, his per dunks and threes worst offensive season of his career. They're replacing him with Desmond Bane in his prime. This is like wild to me. This is a team that was on a mid-40 win trajectory with all of its players improving and going into their prime, adding like an all-star or fringe all-star level player. Like, is it crazy to think that the Magic can win 55 games next year, 60 games? Like, this is huge for them.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well summarized because, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think when you detail the injury and shooting bad luck that we saw for the Magic, this is something you and I talked a lot about last season. It's not quite as like loud and horrible a bad luck season as like the Pelicans and Sixers had, you know, last season or something, where like the injuries are just completely insane. That nothing's going well. All these guys are regressing. The Grizzlies 2024 season, where, you know, they had all of these ridiculous injuries, multiple injuries on top of each other. Everything's just going really horribly. It wasn't like those seasons, but it was sneakily like in towards that direction with just everything you kind of chronicled. And I think that Orlando Magic fans could be kind of looking at it like, you know, this team's not as good. This team's really far away. I've seen people say that on social media. This team's really far away. Look how they lost to Boston and the fashion that they lost to Boston and these things. And then you could be a Magic fan or NBA fan and say, actually, look at all these factors that didn't go in their direction and how they were still able to even make the playoffs and even be in a situation where they're battling with a team like Boston and didn't really get wiped off the board against them. So to me, I definitely look at it in that way. I think that I agree with you on the injury luck. And I think it's really smart what the Magic are doing because, in my opinion, what they're saying and something I love about the deal for them is the philosophical approach that it represents from Orlando. Firstly, they're not looking at last season saying, oh, we're so far away. You know, we lost in the first round in 5 games. They're looking at last season saying, hey, nothing went well for us, but we have expected regression for the next season. Guys are going to get better. Paolo Banchero is going to take a leap. Franz already did and will continue to get better, in my opinion. And these guys that all shot horrible, like career worst shooting seasons, they're going to improve. And then they looked at it and they said, okay, what do we actually need here? Everybody's talked about Orlando needs a point guard. You know, they have these 2 amazing wings. They need a table setter, all this and that. They should be going after Darius Garland. They should be going after Trae Young. And I think there's validity to them potentially going after either of those guys, Darius Garland or Trae Young. I think Trae Young less because he probably needs to be on the ball at a near league leading offensive level to be able to confer his maximum value. But what Orlando did here, in my opinion, and maybe they looked into acquiring those guys, which would make sense too, but the direction that they actually went in right now is they said, we don't need that. We don't need a table setting point guard. We don't need one of these guys to set up Paolo and Franz to be able to be more effective. They said, we have 2 potentially elite playmaking wings. Paolo is not there yet, but we'll get more into that because I think we can expect him to approach that direction more so than he has. We don't need a table setter. We need an elite additive player who can have a symbiotic relationship with those guys, where Franz and Paolo both make that player more dangerous by leveraging their on-ball gravity, and and to get a guy like Bane more effective shots, efficient shots. And then Bane makes Franz and Paolo more dangerous by leveraging his off-ball gravity so they could effectively capitalize on matchup advantages that they may get, spacing advantages that they may get. That's a perfectly symbiotic relationship. And we don't need a table-setting point guard who runs all the plays and who puts guys into the right position and everyone else is around him as a play finisher. We have guys who create, and we just need to have players play their roles, not based on their positions, but based on what they do best. And I love that philosophical approach from where you have two primary initiating wings, and now you have two smaller off-ball wings in Suggs and Bane who can still be secondary or tertiary creators for you, especially against opposing benches. But their main impact is going to be from everything they do off the ball, including off-ball defense, including spacing, including shooting, including cutting. And I think that's a modern approach. I think it's a strong approach for Orlando specifically because they're set up to be a defensive powerhouse for a really long time. And I think it's just really smart, like team roster construction and management. And I think it's going to really pay off. And I definitely want to hear what your thoughts on that. And I also want to talk about, obviously, Desmond Bane, a player who I think is one of the most underrated players in the NBA, a guy who I've loved since he's come into the league. But yeah, what are your thoughts about that on like the philosophical approach to team building that I think is reflected by this move by Orlando?
Yeah, I thought you nailed it. I totally agree that Bane is just so slept on as a player. And when we describe like his synergy in Orlando, look, I don't think that the Magic don't need that table setter. So maybe we kind of diverge a bit here. I think that this is actually an acknowledgement by the Magic that they need someone like that. Franz and Paolo can't just do it alone. It can't just be Franz and Paolo all the time surrounded by purely additive shooters like Suggs and KCP, where I do think that they wanted a little bit more juice in terms of someone who can start the offense from the perimeter, from the guard position. But I do think that everything you said about the symbiotic relationship between Bane and Franz and Paolo, like they're still going to be 1 and 2. Bane's not coming in to like run the show. I do think I would value the tertiary creation he brings a little bit more than maybe you do. Could be wrong about that. I think where this is really going to help too is with Jalen Suggs. And because I think that there was a lot of pressure on Suggs to be that tertiary creator. And he's just not a natural initiator in that way. And I think that the addition of Bane lets Bane be the third option. Let's Bane be the guy who, okay, Paolo's not going to do it this time. Okay, Paolo's off the court. Franz isn't going to do it this time. It lets Bane be that third option and lets Jalen Suggs sort of focus on what he's already shown he can be elite at, which is shooting and defense. I think Bane is clever in the pick and roll. I think he'll immediately, as you alluded to, form a good two-man tandem with either Franz or Paolo. He's been in, I think, at least the 79th percentile of assist percentage the last 3 seasons. His turnover percentage took a dip last season, but like on the whole throughout his career, he's been above average there. He's a good enough defender that he's not going to affect the or compromise the backbone of the Magic's foundation, which is their defense. I think that assuming Suggs comes back healthy, you can put Suggs, Bane, Franz, Paolo with any of Carter, Isaac, Mo Wagner, or Goga, and that just like instantly becomes one of my favorite lineups in the league. And to bring this back to what you talked about with the synergy, while I do believe that Bane will bring a little bit more initiation juice from the guard position, the really great thing about Bane, and the reason I think you and I both think he's one of the most underrated players in the league in terms of impact on winning and team building, is that while he can give you that secondary creation, while he can run the occasional pick and roll, and we've seen Bane whip that one-handed pass to the corner a million times, he can do these things. His impact is not remotely reliant on it, not reliant on it in the slightest. He gives you impact in so many other areas of the game that if Paolo does make that star leap, if Franz keeps getting better, and it's just clear that like, okay, Paolo and Franz, these are the guys, these are your all-stars, Bane's still going to be really good. That's not going to mitigate his impact at all. We've seen him play off Ja Morant. We've seen him play off Jaren Jackson Jr. He's going to be able to play off Franz and Paolo and just bring that additive impact. This is just a picture perfect fit.
Yeah, I love what you said. I think I think where we diverge mostly is it's interesting because like I think that Suggs is probably, if I had to say, I would have Suggs as a slightly better playmaker than Desmond Bane, and I would say he's still like the tertiary playmaker for me for the Magic team. But I think that it's an interesting situation where you have guys, Suggs and Bane, who both can really thrive in that secondary, tertiary playmaking role with another guy on the court. And I think it's important to have that option to go to. But I do think that we saw Desmond Bane kind of have a little bit of, I think, his worst season since his rookie season last season. I think a lot of that has to do with some of his role being a little bit in flux coming off of the Ja Morant injury season where he was doing so much initiation and then him kind of floating back and forth between those roles as Ja was available, as, you know, based on what the coaching staff wanted to do. I think there's some injury stuff that had to do with that. But I think regardless of whether you have Bane or Suggs as a better playmaker, initiator, I think we all agree that Franz and Paolo are the two guys that are going to do that the most. And I think that we agree that Suggs and Bane are going to be guys who can really thrive in the role playing off of them. And that's what's most important. I do think that Bane is like super underrated. And, you know, I tweeted something, I'm not going to say exactly what I said, but I tweeted something to the effect of where I was just trying to hype up how good Bane is and got a really strong reaction on like kind of the players that I think he's, you know, very explicitly more impactful and better than. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the entire league. And we can start, I think he's a good defender, a very solid defender, an underrated defender as well, but we can really dial in on what he does on the offensive side of the ball. I do think he had a little bit of a down year with some nagging injuries and like some role kind of uncertainty, but I think we can quantify his impact on defense and look at last year and look at the 3 years prior. So the last 4 years of his career, according to the best publicly available one number impact metrics, EPM and LeBron, respectively. This is on offensive impact. Desmond Bane was 91st percentile and 92nd percentile, 94th percentile and 92nd percentile, 94th percentile and 94th percentile, 95th percentile and 96th percentile. This is a consistency across the two best metrics that track in almost perfect alignment with each other, that he is a top 5th to 8th percentile offensive player in the entire NBA. And this is especially nice data because I talked about how much his role has kind of floated in and out in different situations based on how much Ja has been out, how much he's been in and out with injuries. He's actually played technically in very different contextual environments where his responsibilities have differed based on availability, and his impact is still extremely consistent. What I just read, like you rarely see where these impact metrics line up just like eye for eye perfectly, like where they're almost exactly the same each season. And that is a huge green flag indicator that there is a lot of reasoning behind this that makes both of these metrics see him. And I could go through some of the other metrics like box plus minus, which also lines up consistently, but we just see consistency across the board. This is how good Desmond Bane is. And I think we can be extremely confident about that. And then before I kick it back over to you, if we think about Orlando's needs, and you talked a little bit about the really horrible shooting luck that they received, we obviously know what they need is shooting. We know that Orlando shot the very worst percentage in the NBA on threes, on all kinds of threes, at 32.2%, which is like a laughable number. Do you know this, Geoff? They also shot 35.1% on wide open threes. So let me contextualize how bad that is. Orlando shot worse on wide open threes. That is saying the closest defender is at least 6 feet away. Then 23 teams shot from three overall. Let me say that again. Orlando shot worse on wide open threes than over 2/3 of the NBA shot on all threes, which includes tightly contested and very tightly contested threes. That is like revoltingly bad. It makes my skin crawl how bad that is. That's not just like your players suck. That is there is a bad luck interjected into that. But now you're bringing in Desmond Bane. What does Desmond Bane do as a 3-point shooter? I don't know. An elite 41% career 3-point shooter. And obviously when we think about shooting, we don't just think about the value that they bring from percentages. We think about, at least I think about, three primary key factors. That is accuracy, aggression, and range. The accuracy is obviously elite. I just said 41%. Desmond Bane is currently 24th all time in terms of career 3-point shooting percentage. That is all time in the history of the game of basketball, in the National Basketball Association. Desmond Bane is 24th all time in percentage. So that's just raw percentage. Let's look at aggression. Besides last season when he was moderately aggressive, let's say he shoots threes at a mostly high to elite volume, so around 8 to 9 threes per 75 possessions. And in terms of range, he's an elite deep 3-point shooting talent player throughout his entire career. He checks all three boxes. And there's also movement shooting and stuff like coming off of screens. I don't weigh that as heavily because I just think we don't have a good way to really measure that. And I'm not convinced at how actually valuable that is, like on volume, unless you're like a guy like Steph Curry, but we also know that Desmond Bane is an elite pull-up 3-point shooter. So he's elite in terms of efficiency. He is great in terms of his aggression from three. He's elite in terms of his deep 3-point shooting. He is elite in terms of his pull-up 3-point shooting. And he's excellent at catch and shoot 3-point shooting. So this is a guy who is tailor-made for the needs of the Orlando Magic and is already in of himself as an offensive player, an elite offensive player who is never discussed that way. This is I think people need to understand how good Desmond Bane is, and it is not happening, and I think it will next year if he stays healthy.
I also think, just to add on to what you're saying about the types of threes he's making, I agree with you that we can weigh the importance of those differently maybe. But one area where I do think it matters here, like if you're an Orlando Magic fan, you're probably hearing XJ and I talk about what an elite offensive player, what an elite shooter Desmond Bane is and how overwhelming the data is. And you're probably, maybe part of you is feeling a bit apprehensive. And you're like, I've heard this story before. An elite shooter is, coming to Orlando. They got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope last year. And what does KCP do? And honing in on the types of shots that Bane shoots, I think is the important difference here. Since 2019, KCP has been assisted on at least 91% of his threes in every single season, all 6 seasons. He is almost entirely playing off the catch. That's the least he's done, 91% across 6 seasons or whatever. The last 2 seasons, Desmond Bane has been assisted on 61 and 63% of his threes, putting him in the 8th and 6th percentile. In 2023, Bane took almost 3 pull-ups or step-backs a game and shot 40% on only those shots. He is much more scheme-proof than KCP is, and I think we can feel much more confident that whatever offensive impact he had in Memphis, he's going to slide into Orlando and he's going to be able to replicate it a lot simpler because he's a lot less reliant on the surrounding factors than KCP was. I think it's at least somewhat fair. I mean, first of all, I would say that KCP still was just probably unlucky with his shooting last season. But even if there were luck factors, I also think it's fair to be like, okay, like maybe he did benefit more from playing with guys like Jokic and LeBron than we gave credit to. Like maybe that is possible. I don't think there's much of that with Bane. And when we hone in, when we zoom in on the indicators of what drive his offensive impact, I think a lot of it is just he's a really freaking good basketball player. And the last kind of thought I want to share before I turn this over to you, because I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this aspect of it, is I think this is sneakily becoming a really, really big season for Jamahl Mosley. We talk a lot about coaching here, and one thing we talk about is the differentiator or the differentiators that go in between being a really solid floor raiser and being a championship level coach. We've talked about that all season. And I think Mosley has shown a lot of good things in Orlando. I think that he's been a big part of helping turn the ship around. And I actually think that he's shown things on both sides of the ball that show us that he can be more. I think it's clear that the guys love playing for him. I think there are a lot of really good things. But it's time now in Orlando. Like they had some bad luck that we've talked about, But this is a really big season, and I think he needs to show a little bit more creativity and show that he can maximize all these players at once as they flow into their prime together.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I didn't think about that as much, but I agree with you. I think with the team that Orlando is going to run out next season, and obviously we don't know if they're done yet, but we know what this is going to be, the skeleton of the team. Like I said, I expect the Paolo Banchero leap at some point. He kind of showed flashes of it last season for sure. He's going into year 4. If we were going to expect one to happen, it's going to be year 4, year 5, something like that. So I definitely anticipate that. The Franz leap that I predicted last season with my chest all the way out obviously happened. He was an MVP candidate for early part of the season. And the next thing that we expect, or I expect for Franz, is his 3-point shooting to increase as improve, as his number one goal for the offseason has to be fixing whatever weird hitch he has in his 3-point shot and being able to hit those shots with a much higher consistency. And I think it'll happen. He's an elite free throw shooter. He will become a great 3-point shooter. I will bet on that. So if we expect those things to happen, and now you're bringing in Desmond Bane, who I would sit here and say is one of the most underrated players in the entire National Basketball Association, and fits exactly what Orlando needed in terms of his pull-up shooting. And I think that's a critical factor in why the Magic were willing to pay the price that they needed to for Bane. And then we expect some regression from the bad shooting seasons that we saw from Wendell Carter Jr., from Jalen Suggs. We're going to get Mo Wagner back, who's an underrated big, and Goga Batadze quietly took a leap and has shown to be potentially an elite defensive big. You got to win now, buddy. Like that, you can't have all that and say, yeah, it just didn't work out. We got bad luck, and maybe that will happen, but I don't think that's going to fly sufficiently based on all of the things that you're putting together and the way that you've built this team. I agree with you. I think it's a situation where it's like, if he's not able to elevate the ceiling of the team, and then you start to look at him, we see Tom Thibodeau, get fired earlier, and some of the messaging being implied that sort of like not the guy to take you over the top. I think Jamahl Mosley could be in a similar situation as that if this team is not able to do damage with everything that we're expecting. And of course, it depends on how things play out. Maybe there's an injury or something like that. But if not, I agree with you. I think I'm entirely on the same page as you.
And you just have to look at the rest of the East. I mean, again, you mentioned it. This summer is just getting started. Giannis could move. Durant can move. Trades happen that just throw wrenches into the mix.
Luka Doncic can move.
Right, Luka Doncic can get traded again. But as of this moment, you have Giannis, one of the 3 best players in the NBA, on a team that really doesn't have a chance of contending with Damian Lillard hurt. You have the Boston Celtics, who 2 years ago were one of the best teams we've seen in recent memory, now without Jason Tatum for most of the season. There's a top tier of teams in Indiana and New York and Cleveland and still Boston. I still expect Boston to be, not messing with the play-in. And also I think that seeding won't matter for Boston if Tatum comes back healthy with enough time to spare where he can kind of ease back into it. It won't matter what seed they are. They'll be a betting favorite over just about anyone. I think you have a top tier of teams in the East, and I think Orlando is in the mix, should be expected to be in the mix, and I don't see why they can't be one of, if not the best teams in the East next season with all the things. Cleveland had an amazing season. I think they suffered from some things that they can't really control, not going their way in that Indiana series. I actually think with how things are going in the rest of the league, I wouldn't begrudge Cleveland for just, focusing on the process and how good the process was and just running it back. But still, there are questions there with the fit of their best players and how high the ceiling is. I'm not saying it's a sure thing. I think if you're an Orlando fan, you have to expect big things from the season. And if Bane comes in and it looks like a murky fit and he underperforms, or the Magic, don't take that step, I think it becomes about deployment and not about the players themselves, because we just have too much evidence right now that these players, even the current iterations of them, are amazing fits and good enough basketball players to contend. And we have too much evidence that guys like Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero and Jalen Suggs, with their pedigree, their draft position, their age range, they should continue to improve. So these are things that should be expected, and I think you have to look at the coach if they don't. It doesn't go that way.
I think that's all on point, and I think the main idea here is that I don't feel like I'm in a position where I'm like Jamahl Mosley is not the guy, and I assume you agree with that. It's more of this is a show me year given everything that they're building there and have built, and I do think that is totally reasonable to have those expectations that Orlando be a top 3 or 4 team in the East and compete and make and have it be a difficult series for anyone who is getting rid of them as long as they're healthy. One thing I wanted to mention too before we get out of here, which is that I know a lot of people are talking about, I've heard people talk about Bane's like contract and things like that. Bane is on a max deal, yes, but max agreements are not all made the same. I think that people need to recognize Bane is on his rookie max extension, which I looked it up, means that he's only the 46th highest average annual value contract in the NBA. And that will continue to drop precipitously across the next few years as guys get new deals and the salary cap goes up. So in the next, let's say 2 seasons from now, Bane's going to be like a top 70 contract in the league. This is a top 30 player in the NBA, or at least nearby. You could argue about it, but he is on a value deal moving forward, and it will only continue to get better as other guys start to get their deals. He's making more than like Jalen Brunson, for instance, and that will change, and other guys like that. So, and only 26 years old, 4 years left on his deal. In terms of the pull-up shooting, everything that we talked about, his offensive impact being so consistent and rock solid, the perfect fit. To me, this is a slam dunk deal for the Orlando Magic. I love it for them, and I think this is going to catapult them into legitimate, obviously injuries and health considering, this is going to put them into the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference next season.
Yeah, I just completely agree. It's funny. I did so much preparation on this from Orlando's standpoint, and it's like you have this whole other team that the last 4 seasons
we forgot to talk about Memphis.
They flirted. It's like I don't know what I don't really understand it. I don't really get what they're doing, and I think it would almost be unfair to comment until we see if, and I assume there is, the greater plan plays itself out. Because who knows, maybe Jaren Jackson's getting traded too. Maybe Ja Morant's, maybe this is them acknowledging that there's a ceiling for the core of Morant, Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., and they just wanted to change course. But if that's what you feel, if you feel that the Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. trio went as far as it could go, then you have to just do a full teardown, in my opinion, because if you have Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., you get them in back-to-back drafts, and that's your core, you cannot do much better than Desmond Bane and their depth. They have some of the best depth in the entire NBA, and Desmond Bane, as we just spent 20, 25 minutes talking about, is a perfect third banana. So if that's not good enough, what is going to be good enough next to Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.? I think if this is what you're telling yourselves, you pretty much have to just start over, which is kind of wild to me when you nail picks as hard as Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., and they're both going into their age 26 seasons. I wouldn't want to just get rid of those guys. I would want to find a way to make it work. They're both really good players. Look, in the short term, I don't think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope just forgot how to play basketball. It wouldn't surprise me if he went to Memphis and he had a good season. I think Cole Anthony's fine. I don't want him infringing on Scottie Pippen Jr.'s role or minutes at all. I don't know how many people know this, but Scottie Pippen Jr. has been amazing the last 2 seasons off the bench.
Awesome.
And they have him under contract through 2027. He should very clearly be their backup point guard. And yeah, they still have some really nice depth. Jalen Wells had a really nice rookie season. Edie, like you go down the line, they're still 10, 11 deep. I get the consolidation strategy, but this is kind of the second straight trade where I don't really get their return on their consolidation strategy. Like they gave Jake LaRavia to Sacramento for nothing. And look, those depth pieces, the KCP, Cole Anthony aspect of it aside, 5 first-round picks and 4 of them unprotected is not nothing. I'm not saying that that's nothing. And as we just saw last season, shit can just happen. Maybe Orlando is destined to be injury-prone forever. Maybe Paolo never makes that star leap and he stays like around the range where he's at now. I don't think that's going to happen, but I guess you never know. But my overall point is like, I don't really get their direction unless they go into an even more extreme rebuild. I just don't get what they were trying to accomplish here. Bane doesn't seem like a guy that you sell this low on.
Yeah, I have a similar take. Like I don't, and obviously you and I love Tomas Isolo like as a coach and think he's going to be able to do incredible things with the team. And I have loved how Memphis has built their team to this point. And the first deal, the Jake LaRavia deal, was like a head scratcher for me as well. Like, I'm not really following, but I guess they have so much depth, so it's kind of okay. But now with this one, I mean, to me, you're lucky if you turn for unprotected and a swap into Desmond Bane. Like that's like, it's almost like if they did this trade in the reverse, if they didn't have Desmond Bane before and then they made this trade and acquired Desmond Bane, I'd be like, oh, that's sick. They're going for it. Like this is a great deal for Memphis, but it's like in the reverse, like what are you going to get back for those picks? Like, are you packaging those picks? Are you blowing it up? Doesn't feel like they were that far away to me. I think they were really a strong team, and I was sort of surprised about how they finished. I thought they were a top 3 team in the Western Conference. So, and to be honest, I mean, we laugh at Ja for saying like, I had OKC figured out and this and that before he went out of that series. I don't think it's that. I mean, I don't think he would have beat the Thunder for sure, but I think they should have been a better match for the Thunder. And I think it did matter that Ja Morant was out moving forward in that series. So I don't know. I feel like Memphis was already right there. So I'm not really sure about this direction, but to your point, I do think it's incomplete right now. They definitely have more on the way. And I think it's a bit irresponsible to have a strong perspective on it until we know more about what their future plans are. So I'll leave it there. But yeah, right now I'm just in a standby phase of like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on, but we'll see what you do with the rest of the summer.
Yeah, I just want to add on before we finish up. I thought your point about them being closer than it probably seemed. It's almost like they went entirely antithetical to what Orlando did. Like Orlando underachieved, and they were like, no, like don't look at the results. Look at like the stuff that went into the results, the variance. We're actually way closer. Like we can let's buy now. Memphis was way closer than they ended up last season. Their peaks were really high, and I think if they went into next season with continued, progression from their players, continued progression from their chemistry, their depth, and their top 3, I think aside from OKC, I would have had them up there with just about anyone in the West in terms of like competing on a night in and night out basis. And I'm just very surprised that they went this avenue, unless again, they just say like, screw it. Let's get all the assets we can for these guys and just do a total rebuild.
Yeah. I would be surprised if they went in that direction, but like you said, we'll see. But yeah, if you're joining for the first time, this is Hot Hand Theory. We just hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you have made it this far into the video and you appreciate our analysis, go ahead and hit subscribe. We have a lot of really fun, cool stuff coming for this channel. We're going to continue to run it up on this channel and continue to do the kind of analysis that we do here. So appreciate you joining. If this is your first time, if it's not, we will see you next time. For Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.